Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. We are in the final episode of 2020. So the season one and this ridiculous year of 2020 will soon be in our rearview mirror. It is episode 32. My name's Fred. I'm here with my good friend Scott Graham. And we're talking a lot of things, including featuring an interview with the remarkable guest, Scott Graham. Same name, some relation. Scott, what's happening?
Yeah. Hi, Fred. You know, I've said this about almost every one of these interviews, and that, wow, I really heard some things I didn't know about that person before, and this was no exception. No, just kidding.
Well, wouldn't surprise
it's kind of weird. Going back and listening to an interview of yourself, I re-listened to it to see just what it was that we talked about, and I actually kind of enjoyed listening to it and didn't think it was too stupid or anything. So I was encouraged by that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. A little encouraging playback. So, out in the world of updates, we're recording this a little bit ahead of the holiday, but we're this will air following Christmas holiday and prior to New Year's and that epic end of the year week. So it's just an interesting wrap up. And I think we've been talking a lot about the COVID and the pandemic and the regulations that have affected everybody. And I'll just say, I hope everybody's finding ways to engage and support their community breweries and enjoying this season. And I think that from an update point of view, one, we're a little removed from the episode in the same week. And two, most of it's been pretty similar in the winter here, is that we've got dine-in regulations. We don't know if they'll have changed by now, but it's going to be winter, and it's going to take a minute for the vaccine. So we think most of it is going to be pretty similar. Finding ways to support your breweries, finding a way to get Michigan beer in your home, and to be safe through this winter season. So with that said, I'd love to sort of shift back to talking about the winter conference and the changes that have taken place to make the 2021 winter conference happen. Scott, you want to give a little overview of what's in store for January?
Yeah, as we worked through the planning process for the conference, which we really try and get started in March, April, May, and then sort of have monthly meetings to get everything to come together so that by fall we're in hopefully in some position to be promoting it and talking about who's going to be there. We're working on planning the conference, and then it started really to come into question whether or not we were going to be able to have an in-person event. And it's pretty clear now that we were smart to think that we wouldn't be able to, because we wouldn't have. And rather than just cancel it like we've had to do with so many beer festivals already and so many other things, we decided to go ahead and try and do some type of replacement event that was virtual. We're not trying to just have the conference on Zoom, but really try and take advantage of the opportunity to have more people come from different corners of the country and the globe that we wouldn't be able to pull all together in one in-person conference in 1 year. And we also shortened the duration of it and tried to change the structure so that it would be engaging and not too much. And I was a bit of a skeptic in the beginning, but then came to be a believer that we could do a virtual trade show. I don't think that it's none of this is the same as doing it in person. Of course, the people go to these events to be together and network, and that's just not the strongest part of a virtual event. But I think that the trade show is going to be a fun thing too, connecting our allied members with goods and services to brewery members. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all goes, and am optimistic that we put together what's going to be a really good event, even though it's not the same as what we're used to, and we won't be able to kind of rub elbows and be face to face with each other.
Yeah, and we have engaged in a platform called Expo Pass. So it will be the presentations will be a combination of a pre-recorded portion followed by live Q&A with the speaker. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions and have some interaction there. And that will be through sort of a Zoom webinar experience that's then held in this Expo Pass framework. So I think I was just thinking it is different, and maybe there'll be some opportunities you wouldn't normally have too. I think with a normal event, you're sitting in a conference room, hundreds of people. You don't have all your normal stuff. You don't have, I don't know, your computer and the opportunity to really prepare in a different way. So I think in some ways your access to converse with the speakers may actually improve in a virtual setting outside of having a beer with them and rubbing elbows in the space. So we're excited about that. We've got some great speakers from all over the place. Registration's open. $50, I think, is an incredibly affordable member rate for 3 days of presentations. It's going from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock each day, which is broken down into 4 different presentations. And the topics cover technical brewing, some hospitality tasting room content, some sort of legalese. We got Mark Serini presenting on the legalese of the brewing industry. We got hop terroir and craft malting and all sorts of different stuff, sensory analysis. So a little bit for everybody. And I think it's be a remarkable event, just entirely different. And the beer and food bill will be dramatically reduced.
Yeah, everybody's on their own for that, which is something I know I'll miss. And it made me think too that the registration for the trade show portion for people to attend that, there is no cost. We do need to get you to register. So hey, if you don't have time for the whole conference, hopefully $50 is still worth a day or part of a couple days. And the trade show is an option if you just want to do some shopping. You might find a good value or something new, and there's no cost to register for that, just the registration. So looking forward to having a good event. Hope a lot of people can make it, make time for it, and attend in some way.
Yeah, I guess we should be adding BYOB to the promotional materials. Make sure people come ready to quench their thirst with a Michigan beer. So that's the conference, January 12th through the 14th. Pre-registration, that discounted member rate goes through end of business January 8th, I believe. So up to the Friday before. So check that out. Get yourself registered. You do not have to be a member to participate in the event. You don't have to be a brewer. Everybody's welcome. However, if you're a member of Master Brewers of Michigan Brewers Guild or connected through MSU extension, then you will get that member rate. So that's the conference. Heading over to our featured guest, which is none other than yourself. I think it's an interesting time to reflect not only on sort of how the Guild was evolving past 2018, and also a little bit about your reflections on the Rising Tide project in general, which this interview was part of. But I think then when you look at everything that's changed in 2020, it's just such an interesting time capsule to look and hear from a time when none of this was even able to be imagined, really. So what were your thoughts as you listen back to what's changed, and how have how has your vision for the organization evolved since then?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of what we were talking about a couple years ago was reflecting on kind of where the guild is going, and we're still on that trajectory in a lot of ways. We really spend a lot of time with the board of directors at meetings talking about membership and being relevant to members and providing value to members and doing our best to do that for is to do a sincere job of providing resources and value to members of all sizes. And we're very aware that that over the years the membership has changed, and most of our members are small or very small breweries. They may be relatively new to the business, and there are more of, as there are more and more, it's harder to find those sincere connections that help make the group strong. So we're talking about that in the interview 2 years ago. That's still something we're really focused on. We are also talking about kind of financial conditions and how the guild functions, how the festivals are part of it, and trying to focus on being more diversified. And lo and behold, it's this is a 2020 has been a real interesting year as far as our normal business and not having any festivals. So it was interesting to hear the take then and the take now. Our members have always been important. Their membership dues, I mean, more to us now than they ever have before. So I really appreciate everybody continuing to support us, especially when a lot of breweries are having a really hard time making ends meet here as we wrap up 2020 and look at 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was, I just also want to give, I guess, credit or open up conversation for, you and I were part of that first conversation that sort of scratched our heads together and started talking about collecting stories, and then that grew into becoming the Rising Tide Project, which is morphed into including the Great Beer State podcast as part of it. And I just wonder if both your own interview, but also this sort of end of year wrap up and wrapping up 2020, which is such a bizarre year, if you have any reflections on sort of the importance or value of hearing hearing the stories of the members of our brewing community and guild.
Yeah, it does make me reflect on just, I guess, the richness of our community. It makes me feel kind of proud and humbled to be part of it. I really enjoy the personalities and people in our industry. It's one of the things that makes it so special. It continues to give me energy to want to contribute where I can and do things that I can to keep being part of the industry and seeing it grow and evolve and hopefully be healthy for many, many years to come.
Yeah, with that, I guess we'll hand it off to yourself. And I think at this sort of end of the year moment, Scott, I just want to tip my hat to you and say, I think on behalf of many, many, many people, that I appreciate everything you're doing to keep the brewing community together and keep leadership of the guild consistent and strong through any weather. So thanks for everything that you're doing. And we'll hand it off to the front yard over here in Fenville at Red Horse Ranch, where we conducted this interview on a nice sunny day at a picnic table. Here's Scott Grant, Executive Director of the Michigan Brewers Guild, 2018.
Yeah, cheers to you.
Cheers, Scott. Oh, cool. We're going to have chickens. So I guess we'll just jump right into it. We've been trading stories and talking about the history of the guild. And with you, Scott, there's a whole lot of ground to cover. But I wonder if you could start with the thumbnail sketch of how you got into beer in the first place.
Well, sure. Not being independently wealthy, I knew I was going to have to do something when I got done with college. I was in Kalamazoo. Had been exposed to Bell's. They had just been open a year or two at that point, couple years, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 years. And I felt like I wanted to go back home to northern Michigan. I thought, well, maybe beer's something that I can learn and apply, and made a couple of batches of homebrew and decided I needed to figure out how to make beer if I was going to do it. And I wound up going to the Siebel Institute in Chicago. At that time, they didn't have craft brewer programs. They had a 2-week executive course. So executives would come from breweries around the U.S. and the world, really, and they could have a pretty intensive class on how beer is made.
So it sounds like you were interested. You weren't just trying to improve your homebrewing game. You were looking at this as an opportunity for a career.
Yeah, I was, and that's what led me to trying to homebrew, and it immediately led me to saying, no, I need to learn how to make beer if I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So I wasn't an aspiring homebrewer. I didn't have a homebrew hobby.
It's interesting, though, that you saw this window for a career when there's 2-3 breweries in the state, one of them in Kalamazoo where you were, but it's not like there was this landscape of jobs or opportunities looking at you.
No, and indeed, the guidance that I got from my own father was he had become an attorney and actually enjoyed his career as a defense attorney. And he got into that because somebody who was older than him when he was going to college said, hey, Steve, here's something you can do that offers a lot of opportunities. That man himself was an attorney, and my dad told me, my brother who's older than me, and he did go to law school and become an attorney, he told me the same thing. And the one thing I was sure of when I got done with college was that I didn't want any more college without a real reason. And just, this is a good idea, wasn't enough reason. So yeah, I wasn't doing that. And I don't know what made me think of beer other than I'd been going and getting beer at Bell's and drinking it, and looking at, at that time, Bell's Brewery was, a steam soup kettle and some plastic fermenters. It's like, oh, maybe I can do something like that. Maybe. My dad never discouraged me. I can't, which it was only years later, he told me he didn't know what the hell I was ever going to be doing with that. So anyway, I go to Siebel. One of the instructors there kind of takes me under his wing and says, well, if this is what you're going to do, we need to get you in a brewery. And he connected me with Fred Scher, who was at the Frankenmuth Brewery. Mm-hmm. And I went, I actually paid to go to Frankenmuth to hang around there. They created a little certificate and whatnot, but they hired me after that. And so I worked as an apprentice there, doing everything for a couple of years. And while I was there, I went back to Siebel and took a 2-week course in microbiology and microscopy. And then I got to work in the lab and do some other functions at the brewery. And then I decided I was going to go back to Siebel and take their diploma course. In the meantime, I wound up also deciding that I couldn't afford to make a few bucks an hour and do this work. And it was either stay in Frankenmuth for a while or get back home, which I did. And the only beer job available was to go work for a beer distributor. So I found the beer distributor that was selling all the import and specialty beers that were in the market for the most part. And I went and I got a job with them. And I thought it was going to be a 3 or 4 month job, go back to Siebel diploma course, which was a 3-month gig. And then I'd see where that left me. Well, they wanted me to come back. So I went to Siebel, I went back to the distributor and spent another I was there for a little over 5 years and worked through number of different jobs at the distributor. And while I was there, I heard word of mouth that this guy in Gaylord was opening this brewery, which turned into Big Buck. And at first I met with him, of course, thought he was out of his mind. And
you recognize the characteristic.
And then after the series of a few meetings, though, I said, all right, if he starts digging the hole in the ground, I'll go to work for him. And he dug the hole in the ground, and I went to work for him.
And what year was that?
That was in the Big Buck opened in the spring of 1995. So I was at apprentice at the Frankenmuth Brewery in 89, 90.
Mm-hmm.
Worked at the Distributor.
Yeah.
Worked at Big Buck.
So that's a number of years and also a pretty compressed time to see change in the state and the law that changed in 92 that meant for a lot of openings 93 to 95. So, it's interesting time frame in that the landscape is changing.
Yeah, and in 95 when Big Buck opened, we were kind of on that first wave of some breweries opening. Mm-hmm. Bell's had been there. Frankenmuth was still chugging out. Well, at that point, I think Frankenmuth had been wrecked.
Yeah, I think that might have, well, no, that had to be like 96.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you're right. It was after 95 because I remember
96.
Fred came to the opening. Yeah, so it was probably 96.
And I was here at Bell's, which started in 95. And I don't remember how long, but I was here because I remember the news being one of the other breweries in the state was pretty big.
Yeah, the tornado hit it. The building was still standing, but it was cracked off its. It was destroyed but standing. And the Frankenmuth Brewery had burned before that when Fred Schumacher was retooling it to make it the Frankenmuth Brewery from what it had been, which most previously was Geyer Brothers, but there'd been a brewery on that location since 1864 or some date like that. They actually burned. It caught fire and burned. Did a bunch of damage. I think it was the welding and the work that was going on, but they continued to rebuild and put the brewery in there, and it was a really cool brewery to work in. You got you got this old copper brew house, 140 hectoliters, big control panel, old German brewery, which was a unique experience to work with for sure, and to have a crusty old German, Fred. Well, you see this someday, but it was a great experience. I was lucky to kind of find my way into it. And
well,
I said
and how big is your team at that point? How many people worked at the brewery?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us, plus some part-time at packaging.
And Bell's couldn't have had more than 5 or 6, and Stroh was wrapping up. If they had anybody brewing, it might have been a few on the pilot system, right?
Right, that's right.
So I'm just thinking the universe of beer jobs in the state of Michigan was about 20, and you got a position. I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Huge opportunity.
Yeah, and it kept happening to me. I mean, I was happening.
It's an interesting number to think about
and it was happening to me. I had never really thought about.
In terms of the number of employees we have with 340 breweries, compared to the number of employees we had in the mid '80s.
Yeah, you can hardly swing a dead cat by the tail and not hit a brewer these days.
We'll make sure to get that on the jacket cover. You can't swing a dead cat by the tail, I tell you. So take me to your, so you're a Big Buck now.
Yeah.
What's your first recollection of the first conversations or your first experience with the idea of the Brewers Guild?
Well, I remember Rex inviting, Rex had stopped by. He was just getting the beer guide going. And at some point shortly after that, he invited a group of whoever to, what was the place in Saginaw? Hamlin Pub or something?
Hamilton Street.
Yeah, okay.
I've been polishing this wood a little bit.
Yeah.
I know the story by now.
I didn't go for whatever reason.
Oh, really?
I didn't go to that meeting.
And we still hired you.
Yeah. And then that led to...
Did Big Buck go?
No.
Nobody went.
No, and in fact, at that time, there was another guild was starting before the Michigan Brewers Guild, and it was Bill Rolinski from Big Buck, it was Karen from Lake Superior, and Don Moody was involved from Hereford and Hops, and it never really got off the ground and went anywhere. But there was a little effort, and there was, I don't have any recollection of why I couldn't go. There's something that kept me from driving to Saginaw. But I did go to the next meeting that was scheduled, which was I don't know if that's when we were at Michigan Brewing Company, and
I believe so.
and actually,
And that's when we-
formed and
yeah.
elected a initial board of directors, and I was there, was there ever since.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
And so what did you take away from that next meeting, and what did your involvement look like?
I don't know. I don't recall having any curiosity or anything other than feeling like, well, this is what's happening, and we need to be a part of it. And it was just, all I can remember is it being assumed that, I didn't have anybody telling me to do or not do. It's remarkable the autonomy I had to run the brewery. And I was a lot younger then.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like, okay, this is what's happening. Be involved with it and be part of it.
And did you have a sense of, did you have a sense of, how would you describe what you saw in terms of watching the landscape change? And like, a number of breweries are opening in that time, and now you're in a meeting. And what I hear you saying is that it kind of felt natural, like the next progression. But did you also have a sense of wonder in terms of what's up next?
I don't think so. I really don't think I was that insightful or thoughtful about it. I think it was really just kind of going down the road as it played itself out.
Yeah.
And really, everybody was kind of coming together as a community as they opened. Really, probably not every brewery became part of the community, but it sure seems, looking back, it sure seems like it. Everybody was just kind of, okay, there's only so many of us. Let's work on this together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think we'll get to it later, but I'm starting in this project and talking to so many people. I'm grasping how different our perspective was in Kalamazoo, being one of the only companies that had been there for a little bit. It was a different sea change, being a 12-year-old brewery versus a year-old or 2-year-old brewery.
Yeah, and certainly, the early Kalamazoo Brewing Company, Larry wasn't looking at anybody around him going, well, they're doing it.
No.
He was doing it.
Yeah. So, how did your involvement change? I don't believe you were an inaugural board, but you were right after. Or tell me about that.
Yeah, I was. I offered to be on the first board and wasn't elected, and then the second year I got elected to the board.
And so, had you done anything like that before? And what were the issues facing that board, and what was it like to kind of dig in and start doing the work?
Yeah, no, I hadn't ever been on a board like that. And again, I took it very much as just what was coming at me, and then see what you can do. But the festival was a big thing, and I remember early on I was involved with festival planning. That's what I remember as really what the first couple years I did. I was treasurer 1 year or 2 years, and I did not do a good job at that. I'm not a good treasurer. I don't think I was that helpful.
Insights gained.
Yeah. So no, the festival was kind of the project. We didn't have much of an organization. We had the original bylaws that James Partridge put together for us, and no, I don't think anybody thought about it. It's just like, okay, you've got organizational documents. He filed articles of incorporation. There you go. Nobody took a look at what we were doing as an organization and considered what we should or shouldn't be doing. It was really just taking what came next, and because everybody was a busy volunteer, we kind of did bits and pieces and had meetings, and it just kind of flowed forward.
And so to kind of breeze through the years a little bit, how many years were you involved in and still in the brewing community prior to moving to the next stage of your career?
So in fall of 2001, I went to work for Miller Brewing Company.
So that would have been about 2-3 years.
I was 5 years at Big Buck, over 5 years at Big Buck, with
But if you were on the board in 98,
98, yeah,
Then
98, yep,
about
probably 3 years.
5 years at Big Buck, 3 in
Yep.
the Guild.
Yep. Yeah, and then I took my kind of hiatus from small beer and went to work for big beer in corporate America.
Yeah. And how did that change feel? What did it look like, and how long were you doing that?
It's an interesting part of my story. I think I mentioned that along the way, these things happened to me. I think maybe hard work creates its own opportunity a little bit, but these things presented themselves to me in every step along the way. And the reason I wound up going to Miller Brewing Company was the same thing. Big Buck was teetering on the precipice of some real expansion or sort of collapse, and it was constricting, and we had too many people, and I was the highest paid, and I thought my role was going to have to change unless they got things straightened out and got the growth going. And at the same time, I started getting recruited to this position at Miller Brewing Company from previous contacts that I had when I worked at the Distributorship and other distributors then that I had subsequently been working with the Big Buck beer. So I get a phone call, and I said, well, I'll go talk to him. I didn't think I'd be interested in the job. And I sat down and interviewed with, it was actually Delbert Hunt was one of the guys that I sat down with. And I just kind of told him what I thought and how I saw things. And I wasn't a kid that was going to chase after any job. I wanted to stay in northern Michigan and understood what distributors were doing and what their needs were, and might be interested in working with them, but I wasn't really that interested. I didn't think they'd be that interested, and it went down the road, and I took the job is where it wound up. And it was a great experience for me. It forced me to learn a lot of things. You'd think that there's a lot of support, but I started working out of a home-based office, and I was using email and doing things, but nowhere near at the volume, and having to learn how to work in Excel or PowerPoint or do some of these functions. Everybody our age has gone through this,
Welcome to the world.
Really cussing, frustrating experiences going, I know if I click somewhere on here. But
you're leaving the production environment of beer, and your production environment is now different and different facing, more forward facing in some degrees.
And certainly working at the wholesaler before, I had been exposed to sales and marketing, but sales and distribution. And the same thing from a different perspective when I started all the distribution and did all of that with Big Buck. And we were having some success with it at that point. And then, to then go work for, my orientation at Miller Brewing Company was a Philip Morris orientation. You go to Milwaukee and go to the brewery and go through a Philip Morris orientation. So it was a big company. And while I was there, they were bought by SAB Miller. So I went through that transition. But yeah, I wind up as part of this big sales organization. There's still beer culture there, but it was the sales department at a large brewery. Sales and marketing is just detached from beer culture. It's not there. Yeah. You spend any time with the guys in the brewery, which I didn't get a chance to do really. I think that there's beer culture, but it was kind of absent in the sales department. But like I said, it was a great experience. I worked with great people, not only the distributors, the people that I worked with at the company, all the things that I learned. I got to do fun things. It really was a great experience and brought me to other places in my work life that really did lend themselves, it helped prepare me for what I was going to eventually do with the Brewers Guild. Yeah. It was really good.
So we were just talking about coming back, and how did that transpire?
Yeah, so one of the things that I did with my coworkers when I was at Miller Brewing Company was, my boss wanted me to talk to them about the beers we had, whether it was Pilsner Urquell or what we were doing with Leinenkugels. He valued the fact that I knew how draft beer worked, that I understood all these things that most of the team didn't understand. And so he'd have me, when we would get together for meetings, he would want to incorporate some of this training to the other folks. And we were talking about draft beer, and I think I wanted to get like the draft beer manual or something. Anyway, Alec Mull, I've got a long history with Alec. And Alec had Capital Draft at that point. He was, I think he was just doing Capital Draft. And so I called him up and was asking him about either some parts or something related to this. And he said, hey, did you know that the Guild is hiring an executive director? And I'm like, well, no, I didn't. And I thought I should probably take a look at that. And then and I was late to put my hat in the ring. And it wound up with me taking this job. Mm-hmm. But it was casual contact and kind of happenstance that I even found out about it.
And what drew your interest in terms of that role? Looking at the arc of your career, it's another new sort of responsibility, but in a familiar venue. But what excited you about the possibilities and had you throw your hat in the ring?
Going to work for a large corporate brewery always felt like a hiatus. It felt like I had left what I really wanted to do. And so this felt like coming back, although to this day, I still fancy myself a brewer, and I still felt like a brewer, and thought I would come back in some role that was more production oriented, or at least in a brewery. But then I realized that this, I was a unique fit for the job, and it was really a unique fit for me. And then again, it kind of had its own momentum once I got going, and then got offered the job and said, oh God, okay, now I have to do this. I remember it being really hard leaving my job at Big Buck and going to Miller, and it was hard leaving the job at Miller. It was a structured, well-paying job with lots of opportunity, and it was a difficult thing to step away from. But it felt like I was coming back to what I wanted to do somehow.
Yeah. And what year was that?
That was in. So I started. That was late 2000. I started January 1st, 2001. Yeah? Yeah.
Guild?
No. 07. January 1st, 2007. Sorry.
I don't think so.
07. January 1, 07.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and maybe tell me a little bit about what was the Guild facing? What were the things you had to dig into in the newly created executive director role that was maybe a year plus outside of having the first attempt at hired management? So what were your first projects in terms of, okay, I got some work to do?
The first project was a pretty distinct one, and it was year 2 of the Winter Beer Festival in Lansing, which was scheduled for late February, and this is January 1st. So the first thing I did was go to the winter conference, which was in Detroit, and that was right at the beginning. And so I'm starting on the festival in the middle of January, and it's 6 weeks away. And the process of getting permits with Lansing was not user-friendly. It probably still isn't. There was a lot of community relations work to be done with the Old Town area after year 1.
And year 1 was a near disaster.
Year 1 left some interesting impressions on the local community. So I went door to door and talked to all the businesses. And we got through all of that and went through the festival. You remember it. It was not even organized chaos, but it was a fun event and well attended. Over well attended, probably.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was get ready for the summer festival and try and put other pieces in place. And again, I come to the job not as a trade association manager, but as somebody who understands the breweries and that background. So this whole time, 12 years in, I'm still teaching myself and having to find how to manage a trade association, and then apply. I kind of have to learn it and apply it at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's been ongoing since day one.
And I think you've always had an interesting perspective and been able to speak to this. But the festivals are an interesting thing because, on one hand, they're consumer facing, and they, they're not always member development, but they are a revenue generator. And then they also answer our original call, our original mission, which is to promote Michigan-made beer.
Yep.
So they are doing more than, they're beyond a fundraiser in terms of they are mission-driven events.
Well, and they're absolutely member development today. We don't have an intensive member recruiting effort. Members come to us.
So,
and it's because the primary reason is they want to be at the festivals.
Yes. Yes, so I perhaps misspoke with that term.
It's membership
they develop
development.
members, yeah. But I was thinking in terms of they're not necessarily teaching members other than by throwing them into the fire. Anyways, that point was sort of sidebar in that I'd love for you to speak to kind of what do you find has been the changing course of what the Michigan Brewers Guild is trying to do beyond get people to festivals. So what are the overarching mission points and how do the festivals tie in and support that?
I think the Guild leadership knew early on that government affairs was going to somehow be an important thing, but also recognized that it had the potentially to be a really divisive and problematic thing. And so, as you know, the Guild intentionally stayed away from it for a while, and then started paying a little attention to it, and then started wanting to engage. And I think long term, that role is only going to get bigger and bigger. And I think that's really recognized by the leadership on our board of directors, is really looking to that. And the festivals are still by far the biggest things that we work on. They're our biggest promotions, and promotion is the biggest function that our guild does. There are some state guilds that are 100% related to government affairs and government relations. Ours is swung way in a different way. But because we developed that way, it gave us the budget and the ability and the stability, I think, to develop our public policy hat or workforce or approach, and allowed us to have a budget to do that and not have to be panicked and going to membership and assessing dues to have any money to spend at all to support our efforts. But I think long term we're going to see the shift, and we're certainly seeing, while our festivals are much bigger than they were before, right now we're locally and nationally at a period of kind of plateau and decline for traditional festivals, not because they're not appealing, not because consumers don't love them, but because the industry has developed to the point where there's so much more craft beer available in so many more places, whether it's a festival or a bar, a restaurant, that I don't think that there's quite such the urgency to go to a festival, even if it might be somebody's favorite. I think they can go to it every 2 or 3 years and be satisfied because their overall beer experience is so much better on a daily and regular basis. So anyway, we're seeing festivals still be a really important part of what we're doing, but not an ever-growing part of what we're doing. And we're seeing other things grow and be more important. And in fact, we're having to stimulate other things to grow and become more important. Our enthusiast membership is something that has been a challenge to work on. And it's this really undeveloped point of potential. Our enthusiast members are some incredible people with all kinds of passion for beer that want to do things for breweries in the industry, and we haven't really tapped into that or developed that like we could. We've got with the business getting so large, there are all kinds of other businesses that want to get close to breweries. So our allied business membership is something that we're really focusing on and growing. And we're certainly more and more involved with what's happening in Lansing, and to a lesser degree to what's happening in Washington, D.C. that might affect our industry. These are huge pieces, and going forward, I think they're just going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and that sort of answers the question of like, how has the guild changed over the years? You just filled in a bunch of things that, you know, when we started, our singular promotional effort was the festival, which also served as a revenue engine, and has developed into this broader promotional approach and opportunity to kind of do more with it. And you mentioned government affairs also. So tell me about the other arm in terms of education and sort of building connective tissue with the conference and other pieces. Like how has the guild grown in terms of becoming a resource for helping the members grow as professionals?
It's definitely something that the guild's working on. I don't think we've had huge success with it, mostly because we just don't have the time and resources. I think we recognize that there's a lot of need. There's been a lot of conversation for years about quality, beer quality, and what can we do to help stimulate that. Fortunately, we're really lucky to have a solid big brother organization like the Brewers Association, so we can point to resources that are already there. We're also lucky that we've got a really strong master brewers district, and so we can partner with them, and their focus is fraternal and educational for brewers, and it allows us to be promotional and business minded for breweries, and then collaborate with them on the annual conference to have really good content for both a technical brewer and then somebody who's on the sales or business end of things, and have a good combination. And it's been a really, I think, strong and, you know, ever developing relationship that's been really beneficial for our members and for the guild too, because we've got them as a little resource to help bring beer education to our members, and we really are working on developing other resources for members to be able to find through our website or through contacting us. It's a function that is going to be probably quite a while in developing, because we are a really small organization and we don't have the capacity to successfully tackle lots of new projects. We have to take little ones and work on them. So I see it being kind of a long evolution, but there's pretty good focus on it right now.
Yeah, I can hear sort of, you know, the current role as executive director, and that's aspirational, and you can see the things that we aren't yet doing and want to do. But on the other hand, the conference is a remarkable opportunity for that education, even though it's once a year. I can hear you saying, yeah, but we could do all these other things. But I think that partnership with the MBAA, District Michigan, and the even just the voice, I feel like one great thing about the conference is that the message we're sending is even beyond the actual learning opportunity, which is that we're saying this stuff is important, and that connecting to experts is important, and talking to your peers is important. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the path to deciding to and then funding a registration per member, and how that relates as a member benefit, and what inspired that decision.
Yeah, in conversations with the board of directors and the development of us having a healthy financial position led us to look at what are we doing for members, and it came out of the conversations about quality, and our conference was the big effort to try and support beer quality. And I think the actual presentations at the conference, as much as we really try and make them provide information that somebody can take back to their job and use, I think that's really almost a secondary learning opportunity, the networking and being around your peers and getting to learn that you're part of a community that can support you and that you can reach out to with technical issues or other problems at work is really valuable. And we were seeing small breweries overly busy, head down at work, no time to do anything, probably not time to spend with your family or on your personal life, let alone to take 2 or 3 days and go on what might seem like a boondoggle to the conference and drink beer with your pals or get to know some new ones. But really, we see it as such an opportunity to develop contacts and culture and knowledge that we wanted to encourage particularly the newer members to go. And so we offered one free membership or one free registration as an effort to particularly get that new brewer to come early on. And we find that pretty much people like to come back to the conference once they go.
Yeah.
So it's continued to be a big commitment of ours.
And how long have we offered that?
4 years maybe?
Yeah.
5, 4?
I think it's remarkable. And, you know, you hate to just talk about dollars and cents, but we were even talking about it last night. So membership dues is $275, and you immediately get a $225 registration.
It's $275 now.
Oh,
This
so
year.
for the conference.
Yeah, it's gone up.
But it's same then.
Yeah, it's a wash.
So, you know, you could say you get a free membership with your conference registration or vice versa.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a remarkable value shift from the early years when we were dividing up the list of phone numbers to beg people to become a member of the guild. And
Yeah.
they asked, what do I get for my $250? And we were pointing to the potential of a brochure sometime in the next few months.
If you look at it, though, it's with some perspective. A lot of guilds have to assess some pretty steep dues structures to be able to do anything. And I've talked to different guilds who have those challenges, and different breweries in different states also that say, well, you know, $1,200 or $1,700, or that my dues went from $700 to $1,200, and they really do have to make that value judgment. We're fortunate that we've had other revenue sources, and it's certainly a challenge as we develop and go into our 22nd year next year. We're working on the budget, and the basic platform for budgeting is that we plan to sell less festival tickets, not have an increase in the price of those tickets, have the cost of the events more than likely inch upward, they don't go back, and so that leaves us going, well, what are we doing with our other revenue sources, and what are we doing with the overall budget, and how are we managing it? It's not that it's not healthy, it's just there were years, for quite a few years, the budget just kept growing. We had more capacity at festivals, and as we made more tickets available, they sold. And now we're looking at other challenges. And so we still have a strong commitment to do things like offer the free membership, or really to offer a lot of value for your membership dollar. If it's not a free membership, you know, we put a lot into the festivals to try and make them great events for the breweries. We're really focused on not only the customer that buys a ticket, but our customer, the brewers that make the festivals what they are. And I've always been focused on wanting them to be great festivals for the brewers who are coming and taking time and spending money and working hard and having to deal with who knows what kind of hardship that might arise. They make the events what they are.
So can you kind of speak to advising breweries out there? How do you think a brewery could get the most out of their engagement with the guild? Like,
the breweries that get the most certainly are the ones that reach out and get involved on some level. And I think a great example of it is one of our board members today, Ryan Cottengim from Witch's Hat Brewing Company. Ryan and Aaron started their brewery in South Lyon. And early on, I don't know if it was the first year, I bet they hadn't been open a whole year. And they came to the conference, and they were there at the end of the night with some of us when we were sitting around too late at night, still having a beer, talking about whatever. And I think they just saw it as an opportunity to kind of get around other people. I think they sensed that it was an opportunity, and they just continued to do that, asked what they could do to help, wanted to be engaged, and it led to Ryan being on the board of directors a few years later, and he brings a great perspective because he's they're small business owners, their brewery's not real large. It brings that perspective to the board, and we really need that as one of the perspectives. So to answer the question, it's the people that take the time to engage, I think, really get to appreciate what's happening, what the Guild is doing, and they get a lot out of it.
And may have a closer proximity to any learning opportunities or situations because they're kind of ear to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to know so much more. We are trying to more consciously engage with the new members. As we collectively sat around at a festival or an event and said, where is somebody I know? And you're around all your peers in the brewing community. It really caused us to stop and think about what are we doing on a personal level, and as a guild organization, what are we doing to get to know the new brewers that are coming in and to have relationships? And we're really trying to focus on little things that we do that make a new member feel like like they're important to us and that we want to engage them as a member. I don't think we're great at it, but...
Can you tell me what those new things are?
Yeah, so now we did adopt some changes in the membership procedure where we want to see the brewery before it's admitted to the Guild. We want to make sure it's open and operating. Had some funny issues in the past. And so we go visit the brewery. And in my own approach to brewery visits is I can't do them all, but I really... as much as it feels like taking a lot of time out of my schedule sometimes to go do it, every time I do it, I feel like it was just a really interesting opportunity to see the brewery. And for a while, I would pick any time of day if I'm passing by to go in, stop, have a beer, take a look at the brewery, make sure it's there. And now I'm consciously trying to make it a sales call where I may not make an appointment because it's sometimes hard to know when I'm going to get there, but I really want to try and make contact with somebody at the brewery so that they... just to have that face-to-face contact and they feel like there's somebody that they know at the organization. And then we follow it up once they become a member. We have a little process where they apply as a member online. We reach out back with contact saying, thanks, here's what's going to happen. We like to see them when we're at the brewery making a visit. And then after they're enrolled as a member, we have one of our board of directors actually give them a call, say, hey, I'm Isaac Hartman. I'm on the board of directors. I work at New Holland Brewing. Wanted to welcome you to the Guild, let you know that I'm here. If there's anything I can do, here's my phone number, here's my email address. And mostly people really like that. A lot of times he leaves a message. Every now and then he gets the sense that he's annoying somebody and they don't want, they wonder why he's calling them. But to have that connection where somebody feels like, I know somebody, and if I have a question or a concern, they pick up the phone and call, it is so much better a step than having something kind of fester and bug somebody that they're unsure about or don't get or annoyed them. So I think it's a little thing, but to me it's a really big deal. And we also just started having this year member forum meetings, for lack of something better to call them, where we really just want to have as many of our board of directors as we can get and have a regional meeting where the brewery members can come, hear a little bit about what the Guild is doing that they might not know, and then just engage, ask a question, ask why we're not doing, make a suggestion, and have some interaction so that they feel like they own the Guild, it is theirs, and hopefully that makes them feel a little more a part of it and want to engage. And we also hope that helps us cultivate new directors for the board. We're also have become conscious in the last few years of what our board structure is, what phase of growth and development we are in an organization, regardless of whether it's brewers or auto mechanics or whatever. What's our health? What stage of life are we at? And what do we need to do to stay healthy and keep evolving and keep growing? And one of those things is a conscious effort to have the board turn over. And it's been culturally something different for us, because for so long, our board was led by a strong couple of presidents that were there for a long time, and and those people loved doing what they were doing and gave a lot to the guild. And now we have evolved into more of a traditional board structure where somebody's not going to be in a leadership role for 6 or 8 or 10 years. And I think it's going to be healthy for the long-term success of the industry to keep having other people come into the fold of the management and oversight, and we need them to engage if it's going to be an organization that's about all these new people. It wasn't that long ago that our membership was, well, today most of our members are breweries that have been open less than 5 years and make less than 1,000 barrels of beer. Most of our members. And that's not the whole old guard.
Historical. Yeah.
It is. And we're really conscious of saying, what does that mean for the organization? What's the organization doing for the overall membership? And where do we need to go? And what are we doing to get where we think we need to go?
Yeah. Anything else in terms of, is there anything you wish more member breweries knew about the Guild?
In general, yeah, I wish that they knew a lot more about all the work that was going on their behalf. But that's not really necessarily the role of a member. I think that the Guild and the board of directors take on a selfless job of wanting to do what's good for the long-term health of the industry. And sometimes that means talking about and doing things that aren't the best or in the best interest of their own brewery, selfishly. But they need to recognize that it's probably good for everybody else, even if that might possibly mean it makes it more competitive for themselves. So I think that the more breweries get to know what kind of work and what kind of thought processes and what kind of deliberations go on at a board level, and then the staff, we have a really hard-working staff, not only the direct staff, but the other contractors that work with us. I think when somebody sees all of that, they start to have a real appreciation that there's a lot of effort being put forth and a lot of quality work and dedication that they might not recognize. I think it's not that surprising, but you don't think about it when you're busy with your own brewery.
Yeah.
Try to keep your business alive.
Well, to that end, thank you for all the work you've done for the community in so many different roles and for a long time. I really appreciate it. Glad to be working in it with you.
Of course, it's been my pleasure.
Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.